Welcome back. And of course, we talk a lot about the economy, global economics, and most recently, the World Economic Forum. So much to talk about when it comes to finance. We are so honored when we have time to spend with Dr. Murray Sabrin. He's Emeritus Professor of Finance at Ramapo College there in New Jersey. He's the author of several books, but his own autobiography is a fascinating book. It's called From Immigrant to Public Intellectual, An American Story. There's a picture of the cover on the screen there. He does have a website, murraysabrin.substack.com, and you can go there and check it out. There's a picture of that landing page. Professor, good to see you, friend. How are you?
Great to be with you, Perry.
Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year. Let's make it a good 2025.
Yeah, let's do that. Boy, so much to talk to you about. I'm just kind of go up to 30,000 feet for a moment. With all the changes going on with the Trump administration, tariffs, taxes, deregulation, all these things, do you think the dollar's going to survive?
Well, the dollar will survive. The question is, how much will it be worth? I mean, that's the old question that people have is, what will the purchasing power of my money be when I go to the store to shop or I go online? And the dollar has been declining since the Federal Reserve was created 112 years ago, almost 112 years ago, in 1913. And the dollar loses purchasing power when the Federal Reserve creates money. So when you have more of supply of something, its price goes down. So the price of money, so to speak, is the purchasing power of the dollar. And when you have more dollars in the economy, prices will go up. And they've gone up virtually every single year since 1914, when the Fed opened its doors in Washington, D.C. And so what we need to do is former Congressman Ron Paul campaigned on when he ran for president in 2008 and 2012, is we should end the Fed, because the Fed is the engine of inflation. I've written 2 books about the Fed. It causes the ups and downs of the economy, called the business cycle. And there's no socially redeeming, economically redeeming reason for the Fed to have, except the banks can clear checks now electronically, virtually overnight, or even sooner than that. So the Fed was created to bail out the banks. The banks helped create the Fed. They wrote the Federal Reserve Act in the famous secret meeting in Jekyll Island in 1910 off the coast of Georgia, which became the blueprint that was then sold to the American people and the bankers as here's an institution as part of the progressive period that will create a banking cartel that will bail us out if we need to. Because, Perry, the banks operate under a flawed business model. It's called borrowing short and lend long. In other words, the banks don't have all the money they say they do in order to redeem the depositors' money, whether in checking accounts or savings accounts. And that's the essence of the financial problem that we have, one of the problems that we have in the country today with the financial system.
Well, there's a lot there. So staying at 30,000 feet just for a moment, do you think the Feds could be wiped out and return to the gold standard?
That's my goal. I've been talking about this literally for 50 years. I wrote letters, op-eds about it, and written 2 books about how the Fed undermines sustainable prosperity. And we can go to the gold standard. The technocrats at the Fed and the Treasury can work out the details. The Federal Reserve has on their balance sheet around 250 ounces of gold, but there are tens of trillions of dollars of outstanding. So the question is, what should the ratio be to make the dollar as good as gold? We've always heard that expression. In fact, the dollar was originally defined as 1/20th of an ounce of gold in 1792. And then President Roosevelt devalued the dollar to 1/35th of an ounce of gold in 1933. And then President Nixon took us completely off the gold standard in 1971, when he declared the U.S. government bankrupt because it couldn't honor its obligations to redeem dollars that foreigners had into gold, which was what the federal government was legally obligated to do under the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944. So we've been in sort of this monetary no man's land. But the really good news is entrepreneurs still are able to make goods and services that we want, even though the dollar has declined in value, even though we still have the boom-bust cycle. But my contention is, if we had a gold standard, prices would slowly go down. which is the essence of a free market economy. As the supply of goods increases, prices will go down if you had a relatively stable money supply.
Do you think President Trump's business acumen would lend itself towards eliminating the feds?
No. In fact, he thinks he can do a better job than the Fed in terms of manipulating interest rates. When he said last week interest rates should go down, when he did that virtual presentation at the World Economic Forum, he says interest rates should go down. Well, the only sound way for interest rates to go down is if people save more money, where there's more supply of available credit for people to borrow. If he believes that interest rates should go down because the Fed should manipulate interest rates, then he's basically part of the problem, because the only way the Fed can lower interest rates if it pumps more money into the banking system, which will cause not only inflation but the business cycle. So what he should say about interest rates is, listen, we have a market economy. Interest rates are, quote, the price of money. Let the markets determine the price of money, not the Federal Reserve. And he should basically say the Fed should not manipulate interest rates. If he said that, then that would be an heroic statement, and it would allow him to tell the American people that the Fed is the cause of the problem, not the fact that they're not lowering interest rates. The Fed should not be lowering interest rates at all. They should just let the market determine interest rates.
So, are you saying, Professor, that President Trump doesn't understand that, or he's being politically strapped from saying it?
Oh, I think he understands it, because as a developer, if you're in real estate, you want low interest rates, because when you have low interest rates, you can make a lot of money when you build a piece of property, because then it's easy to sell that property or lease out the apartments or the office space. Remember, interest is a cost of doing business. So the lower the cost of business is in terms of interest rate, the more profits you can get. So I think he understands that, but he doesn't understand the macro picture, which is it causes the business cycle.
Okay, boy, a lot here. What do you think of the incoming, or at least trying to get in, new Secretary of the Treasury?
Well, he's made some insightful statements about what needs to be done. From my perspective, it doesn't go far enough. I mean, I'm just finishing an article on how to create a constitutional federal budget, which means really slashing spending, because if you look at Article 1, Section 8 of what the Constitution authorizes the federal government to spend money on and what the federal government actually spends money on, there's a real disconnect, Perry. And so I make the contention that the federal budget is unconstitutional, that members of Congress, the president, and the Supreme Court have violated their oath of office to uphold the Constitution, because you cannot have federal spending that's not authorized by Article 1, Section 8. And so this article is basically an extension of my first book published 30 years ago on how to create a tax-free America. In fact, Trump said over the weekend we should get rid of the IRS. Well, that's what I called for 30 years ago in my first book. And here's a picture of it right here. Tax-free 2000, the rebirth of American liberty. And Lou Rockwell, the founder of the Mises Institute, on the back cover, wrote that I'm the Thomas Paine of the coming tax revolution. And people are fed up with paying taxes and getting very little in return.
So that goes to the next area. And in the meantime, the president is touting the fact that he's bringing billions, if not trillions, of business into the marketplace, into America. How does that pay down the debt, or does it?
No, it doesn't pay down the debt, because last year, according to the Treasury Department, the federal government ran a $1.9 trillion deficit, I think $1.83 trillion deficit. This year, fiscal year, which began October 1st of last year, it'll be another $1.9 trillion. And if we have continuation of more spending, which is sort of baked into the cake now, because Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, and defense spending seem to be on automatic pilot. And unless you address all those things, we will see more and more spending. And since revenue is basically flat as a percent of GDP, deficits will keep on increasing. And my great fear is, if we have a major economic downturn sometime in the next few years, we may have a $3 trillion deficit or higher. And if that's the case, then the Federal Reserve may step in and buy some of that debt, creating more and more billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that will drive inflation through the roof.
Okay, so if he does eliminate the IRS, that would suggest a different tax plan. You have any idea what it might be?
Well, he thinks tariffs will fund the government. That's not going to happen in an economy where the government is spending $7 trillion a year. In order to have $7 trillion of tariffs, you would destroy the world economy, I'm afraid, because that's a lot of money to try to get from tariffs. Remember, a tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. And Trump seems to think that the tariff is paid by foreign entities, businesses that export their goods to America. All the evidence suggests that the tariff is paid by the importers legally. And then the question is, do the importers raise their prices in order to cover the tariff, which is a tax? And so it depends on how the importer and the exporter can arrange their affairs. If Trump imposes a 10% tariff on a $100 good, that means $10 has to go to the Treasury. The question is, who pays for it? Initially, the importer pays for it. Now, if they increase their prices by $10, then the consumer pays for it. If they try to get the exporter to lower their prices by $10, then the exporter will pay for it. So Trump seems to think in terms of nations regarding trade, but trade is about individuals and businesses, not about nations. The fact that they come from outside our borders is irrelevant because they're not that important in terms of the American people. All the American people want is quality products at affordable prices. And the way you do that is you give entrepreneurs the greatest amount of freedom with less regulation in order to be efficient in producing those goods here at home. And that's the way a free market economy works. And as a businessman, Trump should really understand that. The free enterprise system is the engine of prosperity, not top-down government edicts and mandates and tariffs and taxes and spending.
So far, what we have seen, though, is the threat of tariffs has brought people to the bargaining table. I mean, it's a bullying tactic, but it seems to be working.
Well, it could work to the extent that other countries have to make sure that their exporters are comfortable with that, because, again, Trump seems to think that nations pay the tariff. They don't. The governments don't pay the tariff. If the exporter sends in a good to America, the exporter may pay the tariff, but most likely it's the importer will pay the tariff that'll try to pass on the cost to the consumer. Then the American consumers pay the tariff. So all Trump is basically doing is shifting the tax burden to the American people who pay the higher prices of the imported goods. That's not a way to create sustainable prosperity as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, let me take a quick break. Got more questions. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, you can check out Dr. Sabrin's website, murraysabrin.substack.com, and you can check out his books and his own personal story, his autobiography. Fascinating read, from immigrant to public intellectual, an American story, and it truly is. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Always an honor to have with us Professor Murray Sabrin. He's a Emeritus Professor of Finance there at Ramapo College in New Jersey, author of several books, and you can check that out at his website, Murray Sabrin, SABRIN.substack.com. And there's the picture of the landing page. Boy, there's so many things here. Do you think we could ever stop this increasing the debt ceiling through CRs and actually come to a balanced budget?
Yeah, this is the kabuki show that you have in Washington between the Democrats and Republicans about the raising the debt ceiling. What they need to address is taxes and spending and regulation and, of course, the Federal Reserve. Those are the four things that, and, of course, trade policy. So you really have five things that the Congress and the President should focus on. How large should the federal government be? How should we raise the taxes to pay for that? Let's get rid of unnecessary regulation, which is most of it. What should our trade policy be? And do we really need a Federal Reserve? So there are 5 approaches that Trump should address with the Congress, saying, what type of country do we want? Do we want a country that focuses on the principles of the Declaration of Independence, that the American people are free and independent, sovereign individuals? Or are the American people going to be dependent upon the federal government for their retirement benefits, for their health benefits, for a whole host of things that they now get through the federal budget? And my contention is that government is really gone much further than what the founders envisioned. Even the big government founders like Hamilton and the Federalists, they wanted a strong central government, but they couldn't imagine something like we have today. And the Jeffersonians said, listen, let's keep things simple and small, and let the people decide what they want. Jefferson said it best. He said, to compel a man to furnish funds for programs he disbelieves and abhors is basically tyranny. And so that's why he wanted federal spending to be minimal and the federal government to have very little oversight of the American people's peaceful economic activities.
So do you think we'll ever get a balanced budget?
Well, that's what I'm working on. That's why I've been writing and speaking to you and other hosts around the country, because if we don't, we're going to go by the way of Argentina. And Argentina became a basket case because of all the spending and money printing that they did for decades and the devaluation of their currency. And you have mass poverty in Argentina. That's why they elected Milei to turn things around. And the inflation rate has collapsed in Argentina from 40% a month to like 2% a month, not a year, a month. So he's cut spending. He's fired a whole bunch of government employees. And now it's a matter of getting the capital from inside the country, outside the country, to resurrect the Argentinian economy, which, by the way, Perry, in the 1930s was the 6th best in the world. Now it's next to last, I think, in terms of economic output because of all the spending by the big government politicians in Argentina.
Is DOGE a subterfuge, or do you think it's got a chance?
Well, the issue is not efficiency. I mean, we all want efficiency in life, but that's not going to solve the problem. Solving the problem is, what should government be spending money on? And I went through the federal budget, and you look at all the line items, and I can't find any authorization by Article 1, Section 8 that gives the federal government authority to spend money on. For example, when the prohibitionists wanted to ban alcohol, they had no legal authority to do so, so they amended the Constitution, which gave the federal government the right to ban alcohol sales and manufacture in the United States. When the income tax advocates wanted to impose an income tax, the Supreme Court said no in the 1890s. So they went the Constitution route, and we got the 16th Amendment, which gave the federal government the power to impose a direct federal income tax on the American people. So my point is, if you want the federal government to do something that's not in Article 1, Section 8, you have to amend the Constitution. And that would mean a constitutional amendment for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, aid to education, and a whole host of things that the federal government spends money on that they have no right to be spending money on. And that's the issue as far as I'm concerned. And I've been writing about this for decades, and as well as other people. And that's why I'm so excited about this article that I'm writing, because I'm finishing, that will address this issue in a way that everyone can understand it. The Congress can only spend money that the Constitution allows them to spend money on, period. End of debate.
Where can they get your articles when they're ready?
Well, I'm hoping to have it done soon, and then it'll be published in a collection of essays on the ethics and philosophy of taxation. And my long-term friend, accounting professor Robert McGee from North Carolina, is editing the book. Unfortunately, the book won't be available till either the end of this year, beginning of next year. You know how publishing works. Yeah. You've got to get all the articles in. It's got to be edited. It's got to be typesetted. And then it goes to print. So in the meantime, I can put excerpts on my Substack, and people can see the essence of what I'm advocating, which is really returning to the old republic that the founders envisioned, or at least most of them, when they signed the Constitution, that we need to have a limited government republic. And that's the debate we should be having, and not trying to tinker with uh, this tax or that spending program. But if we do everything as a complete package, I think we will have a much stronger economy. It really will lift all boats economically. There's no question about that, because the free enterprise system has given the Western world the greatest period of prosperity for the past 200 years. So we're backtracking with all this big government policies around the world, and that's why people are upset, and that's why Trump won again, because people are upset with the status quo.
He seems to be going at it in some ways that would cause hope. He wants to cut spending. I mean, he's out of the Paris climate treaty. He wants to get out of WHO. He talked about maybe eliminating FEMA and the IRS, and the list goes on and on. Those are all moves in a good direction, don't you think?
There's no question about it, but he needs to have a coherent presentation saying, I've been watching, as other people have, for the past half century. The federal government has gone beyond what is allowed by the Constitution. Now, of course, we know the third rail of American politics is Social Security and Medicare, but there's ways we can address that, which I do in my article, of giving young people the opportunity to save for their own retirement. And so what I'm calling for is the second leg of the American Revolution, which will be celebrating next year the 250th anniversary of July 4th, 2026. We've had the political revolution. We severed our links with England in 1776, and the American colonists fought a bloody war to do that. All I'm saying is now we need the second leg, which is financial independence. There are tens of millions of Americans that are dependent upon the federal government for retirement benefits, for income support, for health care benefits. That's not why the colonists fought a revolution, for us to become dependent upon the federal government. In other words, a case could be made that although we got rid of slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation, the American people have become, in effect, not slaves, but maybe serfs of the federal government, because so many people are dependent upon Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs that give them income that they should be getting in the free market or saving over their lifetime, so they would have enough funds to pay for their needs as retirees.
Wow. Do you think that if energy prices come down, that's the beginning of the cost of goods coming down?
See, this is a big fallacy that Trump is making. He's making the same fallacy that a lot of economists 200 years ago made, namely that the cost of producing things determines the price. That's not true. Over the weekend, we just watched the Barrett-Jackson auto auction. Here are cars that were manufactured years ago or restored years ago, and they're selling for millions of dollars. Mercedes-Benz from 1956 sold for $3 million. Energy is a component of the production process in every industry. That doesn't determine prices. What determines prices is what consumers are willing to pay for it. Think of eBay, of selling goods that people bid on. The cost of producing did not determine the price. The price is determined by people bidding on goods on eBay, or the same way in the stores. If we don't show up for product X in the store, the retailer has to reduce the price, and that sends a signal to the manufacturer: make your product more efficient so people will buy it at the lower price that they're willing to pay for it. He's got it wrong. The cost of energy does not determine the price level. What determines the price level effectively is how much money the Fed has pumped into the system.
Including food?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously there are micro aspects. If there's a bad freeze in Florida, the orange crop will be hurt, or there's a bad freeze in Brazil and the coffee crop will be hurt. That will have an impact on orange juice prices and oranges and coffee. But the overall price level is determined by supply and demand for money and goods.
So where do you think this is heading? Where do you think what do you think Trump's motive? Well, I know what his motive is. What do you think of his plan so far?
Well, as long as he comes up with the reasoning, the rationale that the government can't do things that people should be doing for themselves, he'll be fine. He had an opportunity when he went. Well, he did say so in North Carolina, I believe, when he met with the mayors and other officials. Private charity really helped people in North Carolina after the hurricane. FEMA was just about AWOL. And so he should say, the American people are the most generous, charitable people in the world, the most compassionate people in the world. Let's give charity the opportunity and nonprofits the opportunity. He was there with Reverend Franklin Graham, showing that his nonprofit was providing for people in the area. That's the way we should deal with social services. And I've been touting this for 3-4 decades now, that it's the nonprofit sector that is the best way to deal with people who are in need and not have that as a way of life.
Yeah, I call that God economics, $1 in and $1.50 out. How that works, I don't know.
That's the beauty of philanthropy. It's been part of the American culture for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
We need to expand it and get rid of the welfare state.
Good. All right, MurraySabrin.substack.com. That's the website. And check out, there's a lot of information there. Check out his book. I think you'll find it to be very encouraging and inspirational. From Immigrant to Public Intellectual, an American Story, and it truly is. Dr. Sabrin, always great to see you, friend. Let's stay connected. We got some brain-scratching moments ahead.
Absolutely. But the thing is, we have to hold everyone's feet to the fire.
There you go. Look forward to all your articles. Thanks for your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Perry.